All right, I got this suggestion for a speaker from a speaker that we had, I think, about 2 weeks ago, back from um, Boston, I think. I can't even remember. But I'm really excited to introduce to you guys Chris S. from New Jersey.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris, and I'm an alcoholic. Tiffany, thank you for getting me here, asking me to do this. I appreciate it. A funny thing, I spoke in Prescott, Arizona at a meeting probably 15 or 16 years ago. There's probably nobody in this meeting that would have been there, but I love the area. I went out there for a Barrett Jackson auto auction because I'm an old muscle car guy, and that was a lot of fun. So anyway, I'm an alcoholic, and I'm sure there's some other alcoholics here tonight, and welcome if you are. I understand what alcoholism is today. I did not understand what alcoholism was when I showed up at Alcoholics Anonymous. That's kind of a funny thing, you catch alcoholism once you're sober in AA. If you would have asked me,
Hey, Chris, somehow you got muted.
I got muted. That's weird.
Yeah, there you go.
So anyway, I kind of caught alcoholism in AA, and I understand a little bit more about what it is today through some people with real deep recovery experience and the information in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. And I fully concede my innermost self today that I'm an alcoholic. What does that look like? What does that mean for me? Well, I have to start pretty early on. I have to start really with after the dash. I have to start after the dash because my life was unmanageable from a very, very young age. For one reason or another, I started to have a worldview, and I painted a picture of how everything worked in my head that was really based on self-centeredness and self-involvement. I mean, I really started to become concerned, about me to probably a larger extent than some of the other kids, and I became very, very self-conscious because of that. One of my first memories is my mother telling me, "Hey, get your stuff ready. It's time for kindergarten. I'll see you in the car in a couple minutes." I had to get all my stuff together, and I had to run out and jump in the car. She's taking me to kindergarten. I'd heard about this kindergarten thing, from some of the older kids. I knew it was coming. Wasn't real comfortable with the whole thing, but you got to do what you got to do. So I got in the car and off to kindergarten we went. And I remember she parked at the top of this hill, opened up the passenger door, pointed down the hill and said, "There's your class. I'll come back for you later today." And she drove away. And I remember an overwhelming sense of self-consciousness, went through me. I had, what the book Alcoholics Anonymous describes as self-centered fear. You would have diagnosed me as a kid with childhood anxiety disorder or something. I mean, I was uncomfortable. I wanted to just run home. This kindergarten thing was not going to work for me. I saw all the kids. They already were playing together, and they socialized already. And I'm just standing up on the top of the hill, not sure if I can even walk down in there and do this kindergarten thing. And why do I even describe this? This is an after the dash thing. It's a life unmanageability thing. But why I tell this story is because there's something that really, really would have helped me deal with kindergarten, and that would have been a pint of vodka. If you'd have given me a pint of vodka, I'd have been the kindergarten kid. You know what I mean? I mean, you would have been lucky for me to hang out with you during lunch period. You know what I mean? And I mean, it would have just completely shifted the way I felt about my world and about myself. But there was a problem. The problem was they weren't serving 5-year-olds. You know, a very awkward situation. I had to go through like 6 years of school without any alcohol. And believe me, I was born a pint short. I mean, you give me a pint of alcohol in the early days, and life just explodes into this wonderful experience that is just so great. And it's gonna, I'm gonna be 12 or 13 before I touch alcohol, unfortunately. So what happens is, I'm in, I don't know, 5th grade or something. I mean, I'm young. And me and a couple of my buddies decide we're going to cut school and we're going to go back to my house and we're going to get drunk, right? We'd heard some of the older kids would get drunk, and we saw this like on John Wayne movies, and it seemed like a very, very cool thing to do. So me and my 2 buddies went back to my house, cut school, and I grabbed a bottle of Four Roses whiskey off the top shelf, blew the dust off of it, and poured 3 big water glasses. Now, it's interesting to describe what happened to the 2 guys I was drinking with. That's really interesting to me. Here's what they did. They drank about half of their water glass filled with whiskey, and they pushed it back. And they said, "I've had enough." You ever drink with people like that have enough on you? You know what I mean? Like, are you kidding me? What do you mean you've had enough? Are you crazy? It's only like 11 o'clock. Let's go to the city. I mean, that's the way I would drink. But these guys, they pushed the glass back and they'd had enough. And what happened with me was, there's 2 things that set me apart as a distinct entity, as different than normal people. 2 things. One of them is what happened to me at that period of time, and that was the phenomenon of craving. That they call that the allergy to alcohol in the doctor's opinion, and how the allergy to alcohol presents in me, how it shows up in me is, the first drink always does one thing: it asks for the second drink. The second drink insists on the third, and the third demands the fourth. And if alcohol is available, I'm going to drink it to unconsciousness. That was the way I drank right out of the gate. And that sets me apart, because the 2 guys I was drinking with, they didn't have the phenomenon of craving. What they did was they sat back and they watched the show, because all the crazy things I did. And anyway, I go into a blackout and I come to in a field. Any blackout drinkers in here? It's like a lot of hands. It's like a bizarre time travel, right? You come to in the future, handcuffed in the back of a cop car or something. It's like, so whoa, what's going on here? And that started to happen to me from a very, very young age. And then I got sick. Right? Like, I drank a lot of hard liquor. I'm 13 years old. I'm 90 pounds soaking wet. And I drink more than half a quart of Canadian whiskey. I was a sick pup. And for 2 days, I had to be horizontal. My bed was spinning. I was projectile vomiting. It was awful. I felt terrible. But the whole time I was sitting there feeling terrible, I was saying to myself, I'm going to work with this alcohol stuff. This is important. I'm going to try to figure this out. Now, why in the world would I be thinking like that? Why in the world would I be thinking that I'm going to drink that stuff again? I drank a beverage that made me worse than a stomach flu sick for 2 days. why would I even consider touching that stuff again? I'll tell you why. Somewhere around finishing the first glass of this stuff, all of a sudden, everything that was wrong was made right. All of a sudden, all the self-consciousness, the anxiety, and the self-centered fear that I'd been carrying around for 13 years was washed off of me. And I was larger than life, and I was having a blast. And this is so cool. This is the coolest thing anybody's ever done. You're my two new best friends. You know, I mean, it was just, I felt freedom. I felt connection. And then I went into a blackout and became a vomiting pig. But that connection rooted into my mind, that I would never forget how free I felt and how good I felt, right after that first drink. So I'm going to work with this. I'm not going to drink so much that I get sick. I'm not going to drink Canadian whiskey. And I start drinking the things that 13-year-olds were drinking around that time. There was a company that had a marvelous line of products. It was called Boone's Farm. And Boone's Farm had the apple wine and the Strawberry Hill, and then I found Hoppengator and MD 2020 and Blackberry Brandy and Southern Comfort and all the crap you would never drink after becoming a full-fledged alcoholic. It's all terrible stuff, right? And all that's, I had lots of problems with all that stuff, and finally I settled on Budweiser beer. And because from the beginning, I had to try to control my consumption. I had to handle my liquor, and it was difficult. And I tried many, many different ways and many different things. And I ended up, being a Budweiser drinker at that period of time. And I also used a ton of non-conference approved substances to either prolong my drinking or get me over hangovers. I mean, I did any of it and all of it. And it was all wrapped around my alcoholism, because I was like a full-blown alcoholic from, teenage years. Now I started to have problems. I have a lot of fun. Listen, there was a lot of fun in the early 70s with me drinking. Man, I could tell you the high school parties and, the things that would, the rock and roll music. It was the Wild West, and it was a blast. And I had some problems in there, with like crashing cars and DUIs and waking up with 14 stitches I didn't remember getting, and all the things that kind of happened to us, right? But those were small prices to pay for this freedom from what the big book describes as the bondage of self. The amazing thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is during the writing of the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, they were so intuitive. Bill Wilson was the principal architect of all this stuff, the principal writer. And he had such an acute awareness of what alcoholism is and what the solution for alcoholism is. And, we are so lucky to have had somebody put this down in writing way back when, because so many lives have been saved. Because alcoholism is an unorthodox illness. It's an illness of minimization. Alcoholism does not allow you the dignity of an accurate self-appraisal, so you're in way more trouble than you think you are. And the milkman knows you shouldn't be drinking, and yet you start developing this relationship with alcohol, and it becomes incredibly important. So the first thing that sets me aside, apart from non-alcoholics, is that phenomenon of craving, and that's that overwhelming compulsion to drink more and more and more once I start drinking. The second part that makes me an alcoholic is what they described as the obsession of the mind. And this is really where powerlessness comes in. How they describe the obsession of the mind in the earlier chapters of the book Alcoholics Anonymous is that I lack power, choice, and control when it comes to drink. I may have a firm resolution never to drink again and be drunk that same day. So that moves me into a position of insanity. Now, I drank for years. I drank for 19 years, and I cannot tell you the damage that it did to my life and to anybody, unlucky enough to be close to me. And I was caught up in something. In the last 5 years of my drinking, I recognized that alcohol was tearing me apart, and I was doing things in blackouts that were going to be very, very hard to deal with the next day. My emotional condition was in tatters. Life was totally unsatisfying for me. And I recognized that my drinking of alcohol was contributing to my problems in life. And I started to attempt to separate from this alcohol. Okay, I made decisions, and I would start to really try to not drink. And this is a typical day. Okay, this is a typical work day because I worked. I was one of those guys. I don't care how hungover I am, I'm going to work. And I would come to in the morning wearing the clothes that I had passed out in the night before. I'd be reeking of vodka or reeking of bourbon because that's where I landed. I became a vodka bourbon drinker. And it would be coming out of my pores, and I would have alcohol poisoning because right now I'm about 130 pounds, but I'm drinking a quart of this stuff every night on a work night. And if you do that, if you drink a quart of vodka and you're 130 pounds and you drink it in about a 2 or 3 hour period of time, you're not going to have a hangover. You're going to have ethyl alcohol poisoning. And your body is going to be reacting like it has been poisoned because it has. And I would be shattered. I'd be shattered. And I'd come to in the morning and I'd stagger into the bathroom, and I was a non-filter cigarette smoker at this time, so I'd brush my teeth, I'd do my vomiting calisthenics, or I'd do my vomiting calisthenics and then brush my teeth, and throw some water on my face and stagger out to my $100 Quaalude car, and drive off to my terrible job, just shattered. And the whole way there I'd be saying to myself, oh my God, I gotta stop doing this. I don't ever want to feel like this again. I've got to stop doing this. Today is the day. I know I've said this before, but I mean it today. Today is the day I'm going to give up drinking. I'm not going to drink anymore. Today is the day I'm going to stop drinking. And if you would have had a lie detector test, and you would have wrapped it around my wrist, and the polygraph expert guy would go, Chris, did you quit drinking today? Yes. Are you ever going to drink again? No. And that needle would say I am absolutely telling 100% the truth. Okay, there wouldn't be a vibration in that needle. I would have been telling the truth because I meant it. I meant it, right? But here's what would happen. I'd get half a sandwich down around lunch. I'd rehydrate. I'd usually get like a half a gallon of grape drink or iced tea or something. You know how you have to rehydrate because that's how you get wet brain, by the way. You get wet brain by being dehydrated in one of those drugs. You've sucked all of the moisture out of your brain cells, and during one of these debauches, and you end up not being able to think anymore. Well, so I'd rehydrate, and it'd be lunchtime, and it'd be about 3 o'clock, quitting time's 4:30, and I'd start to think, that position I took this morning, that decision I made, to quit drinking, that might have been an overreaction. You know, that's a pretty strong decision to take. That may be an overreaction. That decision might need to be modified somewhat. And by the time I'm leaving work, I have modified that decision to go back to the liquor store to buy another quart of vodka or another quart of bourbon. I drive straight home. I start drinking, and the whole cycle is going around one more time. And I wake up the next morning, you know, saying, I've got to stop. I'm going to stop. I mean it this time. Now, I want to explain this as I see it today, because I didn't know. How do you know what you don't know? I didn't know what was going on in the early days. Like, when I made a firm resolution to not drink anymore, that came from a place of sanity. When you drink like I do and you make yourself sick every day, it would be a very sane thing to not do that. You know, why would you want to drink so much that you make yourself sick? So making a decision to not do that comes from a place of sanity. But as the day wore on and I start to modify this decision, I start to suffer from what they talk about in the book Alcoholics Anonymous as the mental obsession. It's a place of insanity. And I make an insane decision to go to the liquor store and buy another bottle of vodka. But I don't see it as insane. What I'm saying to myself is, well, you know, I'm a partier and I've had a tough day. Today was a tough day. You know, just today, you know, I'm gonna buy a bottle of vodka. You know, so what I think is, I think I've changed my mind. That's not what happens. You don't change your mind. You lose your mind because you go into a place of insanity. And if you're not able to make a firm resolution to quit and have that mean anything, you're now powerless over alcohol. And I get that today. But I didn't understand it in those terms when I showed up in Alcoholics Anonymous. I showed up in Alcoholics Anonymous beaten, and I understood it was very, very difficult for me to separate from alcohol, and I didn't want to live that way anymore. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous thinking you'd teach me a trick, you know, teach me how to not drink. You know, and my first experience with the meetings in Alcoholics Anonymous was, I really thought AA was like a spiritual pep rally. And we would share and we would hold hands and say the Lord's Prayer, and, you know, and like a football huddle, you know, we'd like, okay, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to first things first, you know, we're going to upside down think 3 times. And see you at the Looney Nooney tomorrow, break, you know, and we've reconvinced each other one more time to not drink, that this was all about convincing us to not drink. And what I realized today is you cannot become convinced to not drink if you have the mental obsession. The mental obsession will override all other thoughts. And you will, for whatever reason, if you even have a reason, you will be banging the bar one more time saying, how the hell could this have happened to me one more time? How did this happen one more time? And the book Alcoholics Anonymous is beautiful. It says we've placed ourselves in a position where there is no help outside of divine aid. We have no mental defense against the first drink. We can't just keep our memory green. None of that stuff works if we're a real alcoholic. What we have to do is we have to have a spiritual change sufficient to recover from alcoholism. Now, there's three non-alcoholics that were very, very important in the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous. One was William Silkworth, and he basically said that we need a spiritual experience. We need a spiritual change. There was another doctor who was part of our early, and he said, "You're hopeless. You guys are hopeless apart from divine aid." And that was an atheist that was saying that, you know. And then there was Carl Jung, who said we needed a conversion experience. We needed a whole rearrangement of the way we think, the way we behave, of our belief systems and our attitudes. We need to become reborn, the book Alcoholics Anonymous states. You know, it does not mince words. We are in real trouble. What we are up against is a progressively fatal illness. The American Medical Association, in its description of alcoholism, describes it right there in the beginning as a chronically relapsing, progressively fatal condition. A chronically relapse. So that's what the doctors think about us. The doctors think we chronically relapse because that's what they see. You know, they treat us for years and years and years, and we just keep getting worse. And these early alcoholics discovered a process that, if it's actually implemented into action in our lives, will enable us to recover from the seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Now, how did this happen with me? How did this happen with me? I'm going to meetings like crazy, okay? I mean, I got no other plans. My social calendar is empty, folks, believe it or not. You know, a happening guy like me didn't have nobody was calling me up, you know, say, hey, you know, where have you been? You know, come hang out. I mean, that was not happening. They were calling up looking for their money or something, but, you know, so I had nothing else to do. So I went to meetings, and I went to a lot of meetings in the early days. In my first year, you know, I didn't do a 90 and 90. I did like a 400 and 365. And I'm very, very glad I did it. But what happens with the fellowship gives the gifts of the fellowship. And those are significant. One of the gifts of the fellowship is it gets us out of our room. You know what I mean? It pulls us out of our drunken isolation, and we start to interact, you know, with humanity again, you know, and that was really what happened to me in the early days of my fellowship attendance. You know, I started to make friends. I started to date some of the women, you know, that were in A. I started to come out of my shell a little bit, and it was very, very good, but I still had an alcoholic mind. I'll give you one, for instance. I'd be sitting in a meeting, you know, I had about a year sober, and I'd be sitting in a meeting, and I don't know if you have this guy at your meeting, but I think we've all seen this guy. But you're sitting there, and it's a discussion meeting, and, you know, you're smiling, and some of your friends are sharing, and then you look over and you go, oh no, he's got his hand raised. Oh, that pompous ass has got his hand raised. Please don't call on him. Don't call on him. Oh, they called on him. Oh, my God. Now I'm going to have to hear him share about his family for 5 minutes. You know, tell somebody who cares. Oh, God. Oh, he's grateful now. Oh, isn't that wonderful that he's grateful? I can't tell you, that warms the cockles of my heart that he's grateful. I think I'll go outside and slash all 4 of his tires. And then what I'll do is I'll go outside after the meeting, and I'll walk out to his car with him, because I want to see what gratitude really looks like, you know. And so this is the stuff that's going through my head while I'm sitting in an AA meeting. And then finally he's done. Oh, thank God he's done, you know. But I got to act like a good AA member, so I'm like, thanks for sharing. You know, yeah, I can't be honest with anybody about like the stuff that's going on in my head. They'd throw a net over me. You know what I mean? They give me electric shock or something. You know, so I'm acting as if I'm holding it all together, and I am boiling over with resentments. I am boiling over with self-centered fear. And you want to talk about guilt, shame, and remorse? Almost every minute of the day, I am remembering things that I have done that I am incredibly ashamed of. And almost every minute of the day, I am projecting that tomorrow or later on today, it's going to be a disaster. So there's no living in the now. There's no experiencing the present in my mind. I've still got an alcoholic mind, and I am restless, irritable, and discontented. I am prey to misery, depression, self-centered fear, guilt, shame, remorse. On a bad day, it's the hideous four horsemen: terror, frustration, bewilderment, and despair. And they talk about pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. And all those states are when I'm not drinking. You understand? That's not drinking. This is what sobriety is like for me. It is becoming untenable because I am an untreated, unrecovered alcoholic. Now, where was I exposed to the 12-step recovery program? A friend of mine, Radio Shack Mike, we read a lot of spiritual books, and he dug into a lot of different things. And he comes up to me one day and he gives me this set of 90-minute cassette tapes. And he goes, I didn't care too much for these guys. They're kind of hardcore, but I think you might like them. I go, what are they? And he goes, it's a big book workshop. I go, a big book? I go, you mean the book they give you in treatment? I had never been to a big book meeting. You know what I mean? It was all 12 and 12 and closed-minded discussion meetings in the late 80s, So anyway, I go, I don't know. I go, who's doing the workshop? I think it was a couple of guys from Arkansas. I'm like, Arkansas? And then I did the math, and it's like 8 90-minute tapes. That's 12 hours of two guys from Arkansas talking about a book that was written in 1939. Are you kidding me? And he goes, no, man, you should really listen to it. You should really listen to it. So I go, all right, I'll listen to it. He talked me into it. And I had a cassette player in my car and a half an hour ride to work. So I started listening to these tapes. And they were, of course, the late, great Joe and Charlie. And what they talked about is they talked about a recovery program that could be found in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, which is something that was not being discussed in the meetings I was going to. It was not being experienced by anybody in the AA meetings I was going to. The 70s and the 80s created an Alcoholics Anonymous that was just it was like a bad Bob Newhart show. It was like bad group therapy with no responsible licensed clinician who's in charge. It was just like a free-for-all. I went to get my car fixed. It's running even worse. You had your car. My car is worse than your car. It was just like this. The stuff that was being discussed in these meetings was just unbelievable. I was going, because I was doing it like castor oil treatment, and I was staying sober. But there was just, I don't know how long I would have been able to stay in Alcoholics Anonymous, listening to that guy and everybody talk about their mechanics. And I can't sell my shore house, oh, poor you, how do you get a house, is what I'm asking, you know what I mean? And it was just really, really crazy. And I listened to these tapes, and they started to talk about a recovery program that's found in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. And they talked with authority. They talked with real depth and weight. they talked with experience, and they started to talk about what the step was, how you take the step, what you can expect from the step. And the first time through these tapes did not make me a convert. Okay, as a matter of fact, they pissed me off, because I remember finishing the last tape and saying, you know, damn it, maybe that's how they do it in Arkansas, but in New Jersey we share. You know what I mean? But what happened to me was I got lifed pretty hard. I'm about, I don't know, 13, 14 months sober, and everything hit the fan. I lost a job. I started getting letters because the computers were coming online, and they were finding me, you know, in New Jersey from states I had fled to avoid prosecution in. You know how that is. It's inconvenient. And the girl that I was dating that I really liked, you know, didn't want to have anything to do. So all this happened like in a week, and it crushed me emotionally. You know, so much of the pain the alcoholic feels comes from our emotional centers. You know, we're emotional basket cases. Until we achieve some type of recovery, we're just not in control of this basket case of emotions. And this was really, I hadn't felt this bad in sobriety yet. And for whatever reason, I pulled these tapes back out, and I started to listen to them again, and you know, this time with a more serious attitude. And I remember, you know, blowing the dust off of my big book, you know, because it hadn't been open since treatment, getting myself a pad and paper, and as they started to go through the steps, I started to do them. You know, with the Joe and Charlie tapes, you know, it was unheard of in New Jersey at that time that a sponsor would take you through the steps. Just unheard of. It was the land of the one-liners. You know, there'd be the guy with 30 years. He'd be like, kid, underneath every skirt's a slip. You know, and you know, and that's the type of wisdom you would get. You know, so did you hear what Huckleberry McGillicuddy said last night? Oh, that was wise. You know, and that was the extent of it. You know, and sponsors would maybe point you to service commitments or let you talk. You know, they just talk, which does no one any good, and that's really what was going on. So I went through the steps with Joe and Charlie and the book in a very imperfect way, and not being driven by virtue, by being driven by, I don't want to feel bad anymore. I don't want to feel this bad anymore. And something happened as I started to go through the steps, even in an imperfect way. One of the great things is we don't have to do this stuff perfectly. Nobody drinks because they do an imperfect 4-step. They drink because they don't do a 4-step. Nobody drinks because they screw up some amends. They drink because they don't do amends. We drink because of our personal disobedience to spiritual principles. That's why we relapse, you know. So I was at least trying. So I got a passing grade. And what happened was, here's the first thing that started to happen with me. I believe when we come into Alcoholics Anonymous, we come in with broken spirits. And the reason I believe that is because if you're anything like me, you have let down everybody that cares about you 100 times. And even more so, you've let yourself down. And you've done things that you just wish you could take back. And it's just, you know, it's your life has just been like a nightmare. And you got to figure out how not to think about it, how to like get past the memories of the suffering that, you know, and all that stuff breaks our spirit. And then we show up in Alcoholics Anonymous, and we you know, we're kind of practiced at acting like we're sane. You know what I mean? Like, you know, yeah, I'm sane. I'm sane. And we kind of pretend everything's okay. How you doing, Chris? Great. Got 120 days. You know, everything's great. You know what I mean? And everything is not great. You know, I've got my spirit has been broken. And going through these steps, you know, starting to make some amends, doing some inventory, you know, like really looking in a constructive way at some of the things that I've done in a constructive way. It's what some of my emotions you know, why they're generated and the damage that they've done, you know, examining this stuff with purpose, which is what the steps ask us to do. My spirit starts to heal. And, you know, I'm doing this rather slowly. So what's going on is other people are recognizing before I am that I'm recovering. And they're coming up to me and they're going, Chris, man, you've changed a lot. You know, what are you doing? What are you doing? And by this time I got myself a bunch of sponsees, you know, because now I'm sharing, you know, and I'm talking a little bit about some of my experience with these steps, even though it wasn't a huge experience. And I start to get a bunch of sponsees. And I don't know about you, but I had a bunch of sponsees. The crazy people were like attracted to me for some reason. I don't know what it is. Something about my character. I don't know. But you know, I would get the psychopaths and the lunatics, and for the most part, these guys would drink on me. You know, you ever have a sponsee drink on you and make you look bad in AA? Is Harry yours? Do you know he's drinking? He smells like alcohol, and he's hitting on the girls, and he's borrowing money. Yeah, Harry's mine. You know, I'll have a talk with him. You know, I had a lot of guys like that, you know, making me look bad. So what I decided to do, believe me, I just decided to do this. I believe that a lot of times when we're open to guidance, we get guidance. When we're open to the will of God, we get the will of God. You know, that's the whole recovery process, is getting to a point where, you know, our lives are being managed by divine guidance rather than insane self. You know, that's the whole point of Alcoholics Anonymous. And what I decided to do is I started to bringing these guys over to my house, and I would open up the big book on the title page and go through the first 164. And when it said to do something, we would do it. I would make sure that they did it. And there's a lot of people who, when they got to the 4th step or they got to the 9th step, kind of came to the conclusion that they had overreacted, asking Chris to be their sponsor. And there's a guy over here who all he wants you to do is be the cookie guy. You know, I'm going with the cookie guy. You know, so there were some people who, you know, would drop away. But there was a core group of people in the early 90s who went through the steps with me. And, you know, we were all learning, you know what I mean? We were all learning this process, and we were all doing this stuff together. And I want to tell you something. I know where every single one of them are today. Every single one of them is a card-carrying AA member in good standing to this day, working with other alcoholics, the people that got through the steps. The people who made their amends, who developed the disciplines of prayer and meditation, and who started working with other people and taking other people through the steps, they're all still around. And the people who like saw it as an overreaction to get, you know, me as a sponsor, I don't know where any of them are. You know, a lot of times people who, you know, who have maybe abusive alcohol tendencies, or, you know, whatever, show up in Alcoholics Anonymous because of a DUI or something. They're not alcoholic, you know, they're for DUI or something. Yeah, and I can see them like disappearing. But a lot of these people really were alcoholic, ended up relapsing, and you heard about them years later, and they, you know, their lives had just gone to hell. So what I learned from that experience is how important these 12 steps are. You know, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are making a comeback in AA today. You know, I used to go to step meetings galore in the late 80s and early 90s. I can't tell you how many step meetings I went to where they'd read from the 12 steps and 12 traditions, and they'd share about the steps, and they'd philosophize about the steps, and they'd have opinions on the steps. And they just weren't doing them, you know. And it became crazy. Today, I understand that these are action steps to be taken. I want everything intellectually. I want you to give me the self-help book that's going to change my life by reading it. But the thing is a spiritual life is not gained intellectually. That's the wrong discipline for a spiritual life. A spiritual life is gained by action. Your feet are more important than your head in the spiritual world. You know what I mean? What we're doing and where we're going, and the commitments that we're taking and the service we're doing. All of that plays into the spiritual growth and the spiritual life. Reading the heady books is, sometimes comforting and helps our vocabulary a little, our spiritual vocabulary, so we can sound impressive in discussion meetings, but it doesn't really change our lives. The steps change our lives. Now, I'm showing up tonight in Prescott, Arizona. I want to tell you that I'm showing up with an awakened spirit. I've had a spiritual awakening as the result of these 12 steps. Now, that does not make me a perfect person. One of the things that I've found is there is always work to do in the spiritual world. There is always challenges to be faced. There's always a deeper connection with this power greater than ourselves to be had. So I am not a perfect person, but what these steps have really built me into is somebody that's incredibly useful. I'm incredibly useful to my community. I'm incredibly useful to my family. I am incredibly useful in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that is amazing to me, because my last 2 years of drinking, I was good for nothing. All I could do was work, go to the liquor store, drink myself into unconsciousness. Work, go to the liquor store, drink myself into unconsciousness. There is no more selfish life than something like that, because you're not available for anybody or anything. I'd be drinking and somebody be knocking on the door down. I mean, don't be coming over here asking me to help you move. Go away. You know what I mean? Leave me alone. Today, you would not believe some of the commitments that I've taken, and I've also gotten involved, outside of Alcoholics Anonymous, with different service structures. They all revolve around making available treatment and recovery for the alcoholic or the addict, and increasing the efficacy or increasing the value of treatment for alcoholics and addicts. And I'm involved in a number of organizations, and I'm doing some consulting, and I'm a board member over here, a board member over there. I'm involved in a community organization that is a ton of people got together because there are too many of our kids are ODing and dying. Too many of them. I know this is Alcoholics Anonymous, but the scourge that we never experienced, in our 20s and teens, is happening now. And I'm part of an organization that's doing everything we can to prevent, to make available treatment, to train people in Narcan and all this stuff. And it's all about helping people. And I want to end with this. None of this was driven by a sense of virtue, like I wanted to be like a really good guy. Never wanted to be a really good guy. It's been an organic change that has happened as part of the spiritual awakening. God fits us. God fits us to be of maximum service to our fellow man. And it happened to me. It's crazy. Almost every moment of the day is tied up with something that's going to be beneficial to somebody else somehow. And so I went from a foundation of selfishness and self-centeredness to a life of service and compassion and love. It's remarkable that this has happened to me. Somebody who was just so anti everything. This has caught me up. and this has changed me to the core. And it's part of this spiritual awakening. If you're new, I see some people that might be in a recovery home or something. I want to tell you, there's two things I know about you that are true that you're not going to believe. And the first one is you're in 10 times more trouble than you think you are. Alcoholism is a rapacious creditor. It is a progressively fatal illness, coupled with a mental obsession that doesn't allow you to recover, on your own unaided will. You are up against a monster. That's the bad news. Let me tell you the good news. The good news is whatever you think Alcoholics Anonymous can offer you and can give you, multiply that by 10. Because what I found is I found everything I ever needed in Alcoholics Anonymous to live a satisfied, purposeful life. And I'm incredibly grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous. And when the hand to Alcoholics Anonymous raises and asks for somebody to speak in Prescott, Arizona, there's only one answer I got. You know what I mean? Absolutely. And I want to thank you all for sticking with me for the whole hour. Thank you very much.